All right,
we'll roll. Let's do it.
take two.
All right. Sorry about the cut in there. We had the battery died. The battery pack on the camera died, and also, truthfully, I needed more Heaven's Door, so just made y'all wait. So we're going to take it from the top with Infidels, which is my favorite record. It is from 1983, 41 minutes long. Quite a dramatic shift in songwriting on this one. We just talked about the trio of sort of Christianity, gospel, rock, but this one is quite different, to say the least. Some of the tunes, License to Kill, about the arms race, Union Sundown, about globalization, also sort of touching on, I feel like, kind of looking into the future about things that are no longer made in the United States, which, explains Walmart in a sentence. Neighborhood Bully, in defense of Israel. Man of Peace, as Satan sometimes comes. I, this Rastafarian ideal that God lives in each and every one of us, which I believe to be the case. Also, he made the switch from analog to digital with this record. So Knopfler from Dire Straits produced it, did a great job. His magical licks are on parts of it, if I'm not mistaken. Sly and Robbie also throughout were the rhythm section. Sly and Robbie are a very famous Jamaican rhythm section that have played on more records than you have grains of rice in your pantry. Critics call this the best since Blood on the Tracks, right? Also, I did want to mention Al Clark from the Dire Straits plays keyboards on this. But critics mention that this is, or often celebrated this as a return, the return of Bob Dylan, again, a new return, and the best thing since Blood on the Tracks 1975. So it'd been 8 years out. Some great lines here. What's a sweetheart like you doing in a dump like this? It still makes me crackle with laughter. Another line, I say all so appropriate of this day and age in America. Patriotism is the last refuge to which a scoundrel clings. You can think about who you want to think about. Oh yeah, we got some 45s, which we should talk about real quickly. Here is Sweetheart Like You, the song I just quoted, with Union Sundown. This is domestic 45. And then we have UK 45, which is Union Sundown. And of all tunes, Angel Flying Too Close to the Ground, which is a Willie Nelson song. A great Willie Nelson song, actually. And it appears on among other places, appears on the soundtrack of his Honeysuckle Rose film, right? And they play it on in the movie as well. But great song. Dylan version, very much worthy as well. Some of the outtakes, though, that do appear on one of these bootleg series that were terrific songs. Lord Protect My Child. So we see a little bit of, that sort of Christian. Foot of Pride, a throwaway, which is like not a throwaway. Blind Willie McTell, yet another one that's great. And then Tell Me as well. So, okay. So that's 1984. Let's keep going. Here's 1984. This is another live record. We don't ever want to get too far away from live records. It's not as bad as the Rolling Stones, right? In the current era. So this was released in November of '84, very specifically to kind of catch the Christmas market, right? And I want to say I picked it up about that time. It was for the Christmas people. But this is hot off the heels and kind of success and the return of Infidels. So we have Mick Taylor, who was, speaking of the Rolling Stones, on guitar, Ian McLagan on keys, and Carlos Santana on occasional guitar. It is nice to hear, there's a bunch of tunes on here, but it's nice to hear I and License to Kill, both from that last Infidels record. Moving on over to 85. This is a record that's very special to me, and I will date myself greatly with this without a problem if I can get the record out, or maybe if I can't. I've taped it in there, and I'll show you why in a minute. Anyway, maybe I can't. We're gonna force it. There it is. Okay, it's hard enough to see with the glare. The day I moved away from home when I was a young lad, my friend left this on the hood of my car that evening before. So when I woke up to go to my car, which was already packed, to move to Minneapolis, he had left me this new Bob Dylan record, which is hot off the press. He left me a little note. He said, "Good luck in the big city." And then he quoted a great Springsteen line, which this town, this speaks so negatively of our hometown, but imagine teenagers, right? "This town is a death trap, a suicide rap. You got to get out while you're young. Tramps like us, we were born to run." And it says, "May the boss be with you." So it's terrific. Probably more exciting than the album. The album is fine, though. A lot of people complain about it. It spawned the 45, Tight Connection to Your Heart with We Better Talk This Over, which actually is from Street Legal, the record that made it Rundown Studios. Collectors, or I should say Dylan enthusiasts, call this the Miami Vice jacket. So you see it a couple of times there, right? It's the Miami Vice jacket. So, it looks it. So there's some problems with this record, and they are basically this. It was 5 different studios. There was long amounts of time between recording sessions, 28 musicians, 2 brass sections. I do want to name them: the Urban Blight horns and the Chop horns, and 5 different background singers. So Tom Petty and the Heartbreak, these demos were done. Dylan lives in Malibu, or one of his poems is in Malibu. The demos were done at home. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers worked on the sessions, plus many, many others, including Sly and Robbie. It was remixed primarily by Arthur Baker, who at the time had worked on a bunch of stuff, maybe best known for New Order, but very competent Arthur Baker. This has a lot of interesting lyrics, and I've quoted some of them because I love them from movies and television of all things. And so Tight Connection to My Heart, which was this 45, has some interesting lyrics that were kind of lifted from a couple of places, well, more than a couple of places, but one of them being a Bogart movie called Sirocco, and Bogart says, "I've got to move fast, and I can't with you around my neck," right? Is one of them, and the other one from the Maltese Falcon, also Bogart says, somebody says to him, "We got to talk to you, Spade," and he goes, "Well, go ahead and talk," right? And Dylan used it almost verbatim, right? There's also a line from Star Trek. And I can't even believe this is true, but apparently it is. I haven't watched a lot of Star Trek. I watched those other films, but where he goes, "Oh yeah, I'll go along with the charade until I can think my way out." Apparently, Captain Kirk says that along the way. So there's more. There's just a couple of them. Also, "Seeing the Real You at Last" has a little Bogart bit where he goes, "I'm glad it's over and I'm seeing the real you at last." You can imagine the sort of dramatic situations they get into. But "I'll Remember You" also turns up. "I'll Remember You" on here also turns up in a thing we'll talk about later, Masked and Anonymous. Maybe I'll just hold that for a minute. And then there's another tune, "Clean Cut Kid," that Dylan had given away, actually. So Dylan only plays harmonica on one tune. It's "Dark Eyes." And I've always liked this album. It's scoffed at by Dylanologists, as most of this stuff that's between like Infidels and, the kind of I'd call it the modern era, but basically Love and Theft, I think, 97 or whatever it was. There's a kind of a period of like where people just turn up their nose at everything. So I try not to be like that with that. But so let's keep moving into these albums that are disliked. This is called Knocked Out Loaded. Mine has a songbook, which is kind of funny. I guess I fancied myself a guitar player at that moment, so I bought the songbook. So, I'm sure that all of them have this somewhere. Anyway, great cover, which I just finally exposed to you, but the cover's terrific, truly. There's also a 45 that went with this, although it was from a movie soundtrack. Well, we'll sit on that for a second. So Dave Stewart, who you might know from the Eurythmics, is now kind of around on the scene. And however, this, not unlike the last one, it kind of felt like this record lacked kind of a clear plan. There are some great collaborations on here, though. With Sam Spade, he wrote "Brownsville Girl," which is a long tune on this, and I think just as good as anything. With Tom Petty, he wrote "Got My Mind Made Up." Again, great tune. And has a great Dylan line, "Don't ever try to change me. I've been in this thing too long." that doesn't sum it up. I don't know what does. And also Carol Bear Sager, Under Your Spell, which is where the title comes from. I was knocked out and loaded in the naked night. That song has this drum that click, click, clop, clop, clip, clop, kind of like a horse walking down a paved street that I like. He did a cover of Chris Christopherson's "They Killed Him," which is a tune about MLK and Mahatma Gandhi, etc. I think it's pretty decent. "Precious Memories," the traditional tune, again with great background vocals, but suffering 30 plus musicians, 7 vocalists, 1 children's choir. Let's just up the game a little more with the children's choir. But the original "Drifting Too Far from Shore" has great background singers, and a favorite of mine, my favorite line in this whole thing is "Maybe Someday," where the line is, "I always liked San Francisco. I was there for a party once." I love that. Anyway, Dylan got married around this time, or married again, and had a baby. I believe her name is Desiree. We'll hit some of that as we're going forward. But he didn't play harmonica on this album at all, which was very odd for the time. So let's take a look at that 45, which was a movie soundtrack. Again, Dylan was spending time with Petty around this time on tour and etc. And so this movie's, I haven't seen it, so I can't remark on it. And they just, if you get the proper soundtrack, the LP, it just has the one Dylan tune. And so the 45 has this tune with Tom Petty called "Band of the Hand." It's fine. And then the B-side is actually a tune from the soundtrack, the score. So kind of odd, right? But this was a whopping $1.99 at Amoeba, so you don't have to. There's no line out the door. This is not coming out on RSD 2020, okay? It's not that kind of thing. But it's fine. Petty and Dylan, for a while, it was like a really good and kind of interesting collaboration. I think they learned as much from him as he learned from them, to be honest with you, being on the road and playing all those shows. So, speaking of soundtracks, let's just keep going. And this, I see a little promo stamp through the barcode. So this I have seen this film and it's awful, Hearts of Fire, but the soundtrack good. Okay, if I have any complaint, there's too much Fiona on here and too much Rupert Everett is his name, or Everett Rupert, whatever, Rupert Everett. Anyway, 3 Dylan tunes on here. Hearts of Fire, but The Usual, which is a John Hyatt tune, covered by Dylan. And then Night After Night, which I like a lot, and then Had a Dream About You, Baby, also by Bob Dylan. So definitely worth having this record here. You don't need to see the film. This is enough just to listen to those tunes, and you can try to listen to the other ones, but good luck. You might not like them. I didn't much care for them myself. So let's get back up to 1988. Trying to chip along here. Down in the Groove. Oh, this is also a promo. I didn't know where I got all these, to be honest with you. I thought I was buying them off the rack. Maybe I was buying them gently used off the promo rack. I don't know. 1988, I bet there's a lot of promos of this. Nobody wanted it. So 1988, Bob Dylan, Down in the Groove. There are 5 cover tunes, 1 traditional tune, 2 Dylan originals, and 2 Dylan Robert Hunter tunes. Robert Hunter was a lyricist for the Grateful Dead, certainly among others, but a very competent songwriter to say the least. And I put in quotes, going through a crisis of inspiration. Yeah, you could say that. So 4 guitars, 6 drummers, 7 basses, 4 keys, 7 backup stringers, and the full force. 30 plus, over 10 songs. But let me tell you about some of these odd choices for players. So Sally Sue Brown on here had Steve from the Pistols. What? And Paul from the Clash playing bass. Like what? Odd. Ugliest Girl in the World, a pretty decent tune written with Hunter. Silvio, also written with Hunter, was played endlessly on the Never Ending Tour, which I have a whole thing about, but we might not be able to get to today because it's getting to be too long. With the Dead on background vocals, right? That's the Grateful Dead, in case you're confused. But there's an entire book about the Never Ending Tour written by Andrew Murr that I totally recommend. But he complains endlessly about Silvio being played show after show, which I think is hilarious. It's not quite that bad, right? Death Is Not the End is a song Nick Cave covered. We have some Nick Cave fans in the crowd. The crowd, all 2 of them. He did with Mark Knopfler. And then Had a Dream About You, Baby with Ronnie Wood and Eric Clapton. right? It's also on the soundtrack that we just talked about, right? But one of my favorite lines is, the joint is jumping, it's really something, right? Doesn't take much to impress me. So 90 miles an hour down a dead-end street has some great background, deep background vocals by Willie Green and Bobby King. Also, Rank Strangers is a pretty decent tune on this record. So the 80s were kind of, occasionally rough. So this I literally want to take, there's no notes on this. This is Dylan and the Dead. And mine has, again, the promo stamp out, but also has the hype sticker on the back. And I swear I bought this new, and I swear I played it once. So it is a virgin vinyl. And I really wanted to do is have 30 seconds of silence to kind of, to commemorate how awful this record is. And what is even more funny to me, and I don't want to talk bad about it, but it's quite awful. I couldn't even pick one song that I liked. But oddly, last year or the year before, it was, they put out it was reissued, and it was like this fancy marbled vinyl or something. It was gorgeous. But even the beauty of that vinyl is not going to change what's going on with this and the grooves of this record. So not a big fan of live albums, as I said, but also I just felt like this was it was just, I don't think that it was necessary, to be honest with you. This was 1989, so the 80s were, as I said, were kind of rough on Dylan. The cover, though, kind of badass, right? Dylan on one, the Dead with the roses on the other. Pretty cool. Backside, that train rumbling through your living room, which, frankly, if there was a train rumbling through your living room while you were listening to this, it would be more interesting because it would just be something to kind of grab onto, which I felt like that record did not have at all. Anyway, the last record that I have, because I moved over to these crazy things called compact discs when the rest of the kind of market did, is this record, Oh Mercy, which was produced by Daniel Lanois, of all people, and we're now into 89, so we're at the end of the 80s, a big shift, I feel like. Love the title, first of all. Absolutely love the title. It was recorded in New Orleans, recorded only at night. They said you should only listen to it at night, and I believe that is some really good advice, to be honest with you. It is thick in the air, like the bayou air is thick when you're near the bayou, truly. But he wrote most of this in Dylan's Malibu art. He has a home art studio. He wrote most of the record in there. Pretty solid record, though. And my favorite tune's Where the Teardrop Falls, which has the snare drum on the very last second or two. Gets me every time. Just a whack, and it's perfect, right? Everything is broken. I love, most of the time I love. The Man in the Long Black Coat. They went to great lengths to get authentic cricket sounds in New Orleans. Yes, I'm serious. Hopefully that was the interns or the assistant engineer and not Daniel Lanois, Bill and Time, although I'm sure he's not working. He's not working by the hour. So anyway, they have authentic cricket sounds on the Man in the Long Black Coat, and it's worth all of it. It's beautiful. Also, I wanted to mention that Rockin' Doopsie plays on a song on here, Where the Teardrops Fall. So you get kind of some interesting kind of New Orleans sound going on here. It was recorded in a manor, and I'm going to tell you the street address because some of you all are going to want to go look at it, because I do. I haven't been there. 1305 Sonnet Street in New Orleans, and you can Google that and find out more. People live there now, so, don't get crazy, but you can stop by and take a photograph and kind of feel some of the magic that is Lanois and Dylan at that time. So that's the last record I have. And so when the industry kind of moved, I moved too, as one who's not going to buck the system. And so there are vinyl versions of this record that I'm going to show you next, also kind of scoffed at often, called Under the Red Sky. I've seen vinyl versions, but I've never actually gotten one. So they probably pressed it in the United States. It's probably a smaller run. But here it is, right here. This was produced by Don Was. It is now 1990. Can we get to the 2000s, please, at minimum? It was dedicated to, at that time, his 4-year-old daughter, Desiree. whose nickname was Gabba Goo Goo, which I think is cute. So people diss this, of course, right? There's some nursery rhymes on here. It's just like, Jesus, calm down. I mean, you can't make a record dedicated to a child and everyone gets all upset because it's not blood on the tracks, right? It's too much, right? And so here on the cover is a self-portrait, so to speak. They didn't call them selfies back then, but Dylan took a photo of himself in the Mojave Desert. That's what that is. On the backside, he's sitting on someone's porch. Hopefully it's his own, but who knows? It's very kind of blurry. It's hard to see, but there are some biblical parts of this. See, I'm all freaky now because I don't have this thing to cover me up when I'm reading my notes. So we'll just have to do it like this. Biblical on 2x2, Cats in the Well, Wiggle, 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 and God Knows. He talks about materialism in Unbelievable, misinformation on Talkin' TV Song. We all know about fake news all too well in this day and age. There's Being Melancholy and Born in Time. Ton of guests. George Harrison, Slash from Guns N' Roses, Elton John, the Vaughan Brothers. It was recorded actually not long after Stevie Ray Vaughan passed away, after this record was done. So Slash played on Wiggle, Wiggle, Wiggle. That's another song that made everybody mad, right? But then, ironically enough, and thanks to one of the people in our huge audience who gave me this record, this is called Bob Dylan in the 80s. Slash plays Wiggle, Wiggle, Wiggle with the singer of Ween, okay? And he got to keep his guitar solo that Dylan erased from this album on Wiggle, Wiggle, Wiggle because they didn't like it, right? So he said, Dylan, quote unquote, it sounds too much like Guns N' Roses. As opposed to what, right? Anyway, I thought that was funny. Okay, so Elton John plays a terrific piano solo on Born in Time on this record. Some of my favorite tunes, though, Unbelievable, 10,000 Men, which I just think almost comes off the rails. It gets going, and then God Knows. God is never far away. So from all the Dylan we talk about. But the truth is, Dylan was apparently at this time very busy with the Traveling Wilburys. So they were recording. I don't know that they were touring. You tell me. But they were making lots of records, which were popular, and they were selling records, and so that sort of took precedent over his own work. Bob does play accordion on this album, maybe for the first time and maybe the last, in Born in Time. Anyway, this is hated, so it's too bad because it's not really that awful. But if you really, really hate this album, I hope that Bob Dylan plays Cats in the Well to every single concert you go to. That ought to really make you mad. So, next up we had, now we're in the 90s. So, and there's another shift for Dylan, right? And so the shift is, now he has records. So this is Good As I've Been To You from 1992. Again, in the Malibu, although in the Malibu garage in this time, studio garage, recording these songs with Dave Stewart's back from the Eurythmics. And it sort of harkens back to another side of Bob Dylan, which we talked about, I guess, 4 days ago, but a very long time ago, right? Because it's all traditional folk and blues tunes. There's no Dylan originals. And it was the first album, in fact, that had no Dylan originals since 1973, the album Dylan, which the fancy color and the not so fancy grooves on the record. So this was a contractual filler. It was, they did a whole version of it with Bloomberg in Chicago, but that was quickly shelved. I think Bloomberg did a mix and Dylan didn't like it, and Dylan being Dylan probably never called him back. So that was the end of that. But some of that has trickled out in the bootleg series, but someday perhaps there'll be a whole bootleg of the entire thing. There's some controversy regarding the songwriting credits. We're not going to get into all that. They're traditional, etc. But the tunes I like are Sitting on Top of the World. Everyone knows that tune. Tomorrow Night, which is gorgeous, truly. Diamond Joe, which will make an appearance later in Mask and Anonymous, although it's different here. And then Frog Went A-Courtin', which is a tune another band I loved called the Flat Duo Jets did long ago and did a terrific job. And then the tune You Belong to Me, which was a huge hit for Joe Stafford way back when, was cut from this, and they put that on the Natural Born Killers soundtrack, which we're going to get to, allegedly. We're going to run out of battery and and memory eventually. So these, I don't have notes because I don't care about them. This is Dylan, the 30th celebration. It was Dylan was celebrating 30 years of being with Columbia Records. Oddly, they've never. Is it a reflection on 30 that there's never been a 40 and a 50? I don't know. You tell me. But there's loads of covers. I'm not sure I need to hear John Mellencamp sing Like a Rolling Stone or Leopard Skin Pillbox Hat, but it's on here. And there's Sinead, a ton of people. But there are some Dylan gets to sing. They let Dylan sing a couple of songs at his party, like My Back Pages, which has Talk About Supergroup, George Harrison, Eric Clapton, Neil Young, Tom Petty, Roger McGuinn from the Byrds. I mean, terrific, right? And then, of course, he closes the show solo, Girl from the North Country. There's others in here. Petty, I love Petty. He's good. Neil Young on here, good. I'm only going to talk about the good. I'm not talking about Eddie Vedder. I'm not talking about Lou Reed. I'm not touching any of that. So good stuff. Some good stuff, but, you know, this was $4 or $5. That's plenty. So this also, no notes. This is Unplugged. You know, my friend says it's funny that they wanted to tar and feather him back in the day because he went electric, and now they want him to play acoustic guitar. What the hell, right? So 30 years had gone by. Am I correct? 95, roughly, almost 30 years. This was a very popular TV show, as you probably know. The best one they ever made was Nirvana, by far. Many of them never touched it. Oh, it's not? Who's the best one?
Mana. Alice in Chains.
Mana?
Mana.
Mana and Alice in Chains. Okay. Okay, both great. Okay, so 3, Nirvana, Mana, Alice in Chains. Those were the 3 best. This is not one of the best. And the story is simply Dylan they did 2 nights, and on the first night he did a bunch of songs that he had picked out, which would have been far more interesting. And again, this is probably going to come up in the bootleg series. I'll be dead, my son will be 45, and they'll release it, you know, because that's how it is. And so somebody from Columbia came in and said, well, there's no hits on there, meaning there's no, I could read you, I'm not even going to bother with it. Just, you know those songs at this point. We've talked about it. Plus, in that sort of unplugged way, it's all these kids and pretty people. It looks like a damn ad for Abercrombie Finch or whatever the hell that's called, you know. So, whatever. It's fine. There's a video that goes with it if you want to watch it. I mean, obviously, there's a video that goes with it. Then came Greatest Hits 3. So if you are keeping score, there have been many years between Greatest Hits 2 and Greatest Hits 3, right? This, not necessary at all. No new tunes, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong, let me know. But good collection of tunes, but, you know, and there's been loads of compilations since then. I'm not sure about whether or not they need to be in the collection. I probably got this because it was free or nearly free. Is the only reason why. But then we start to turn the corner. No, we don't. Sorry. We're not turning the corner. We're still in the 90s. I keep hoping it's the 2000s, but it's just not the 2000s, right? So we're back to the Malibu Garage and Dylan doing another album of cover versions, which is fine. This is from 93. It's called World Gone Wrong. It has some super interesting liner notes where Dylan talks about this never-ending tour I've referred to, and he says it was over when G.E. Smith left. So that's Dylan's words. The fans, like me, believe it's never been over. You know, it's 3,000 shows strong at this point, or nearly, or surpassed, I forget, but it's very close. It's been going on for 30 years. Yeah, so... but this is the final, really the final LP. Well, he's under contract. However, Columbia, why would they not, re-upped him for another 10 records after this. He used the same guitar strings in the whole record. That's kind of saying a lot. It's him singing, basically. I do have 1, 2, 3, 4 songs I really like on this. World Gone Wrong, which is the title track, I think is great. Blood in My Eyes, which spawned, ironically, the most interesting video. You can watch it on YouTube. That's a music video. Broke Down Engine, which somebody else I love, Peter Case, did a great, who's from Santa Monica but no longer moved to San Francisco. Well, San Francisco, Santa Monica, and back to San Fran. Did a great version of that. And also Stacka Lee, which Stacka Lee's everywhere, you know, in this kind of thing. Here, we're now turning the corner. I was turning the corner a little prematurely, hoping that we were turning the corner sooner. It's 1997, And don't call it a comeback, because he's been here all along. A blurry cover, we're back with Daniel Lanois, right? Daniel Lanois actually took this photograph. It's a little blurry. The backside is a little cleaner. This has stickers all over it. It's hard to see. But Dylan wrote most of this on his Minnesota farm. Let's see. Oh, I do want to mention Lanois. It's been 8 years. So he was back for Oh Mercy. He was here for Oh Mercy. He's back for Out of Time, or Time Out of Mind, and he won't be back because this is a great record, don't get me wrong, but I guess their relationship had kind of started to fall apart. But there's a lot of interesting things about this. It was the demos, for the first time Dylan did demos, it was recorded in Oxnard, California, which is right up the road from where we're sitting right now at El Teatro. Willie Nelson, who we talked about a little earlier, had recorded an entire album there. And not only that, but on the album cover, it actually has a photograph of this little theater that Daniel Lanois had turned into a recording studio. I don't know. I know the theater's still there. I don't know if he's still using it. I found a funny article from the LA Times from probably 20 years ago that said Lanois talked about how perfect it was because nobody in town knew who the hell anybody was. So it'd be Bono Vox and The Edge walking down the street, and people were just like, oh yeah, dudes in cowboy hats, whatever, right? Not paying attention. And so at that time, it's been some time now, but it worked out very well for the anonymity of the people recording. But I also read that apparently some locals, thieving locals, found out that Lanois had kept a bunch of vintage gear in there, and they were going to break into there, but they decided to cut through the roof, right? Because the outside was too secure, but it didn't go well, meaning I guess they were caught. So, but anyway, so they recorded the demos here, and then they were going to record the record, but Dylan said it was too close to home because he lives in Malibu. He wants to be remote. So, and this was 97, so that's been 20 years ago. So they moved the whole show, they loaded it up and moved to Miami. I mean, how far away could you get if you're in Los Angeles, right? I guess you could go to Portland, Maine. But they moved it all to Miami to a place called Criteria. The members for the first time in a long time, members of his touring band participated in this record. And they're all terrific. We'll talk about them more, but it also had Augie Meyer from Texas Tornadoes from San Antonio and Austin, Jimmy Dickinson, who's from northern Mississippi and Memphis. He played on the Rolling Stones record in Muscle Shoals. We were talking about Muscle Shoals. He died recently, unfortunately. He had written a autobiography that's really, I recommend reading. It's really super interesting guy. And also Jim Keltner, whose name we haven't mentioned today, but who's been omnipresent pretty much and still is an amazing drummer, session musician who's been on more records than you have grains of rice in your pantry. So this was discharged, or I should say recorded for this record, but not included were Mississippi, a song I love, and Dreaming of You, a song I love ×2, Marching to the City, and Red River Shore, right? Also, this had old musicians who were on the Never Ending Tour, but had since moved on to other things for whatever reason, including Bucky Baxter, who was a great multi-instrumentalist, David Kemper, a great drummer, Winston Watson, amazing drummer, I thought, who was on there for 4 years. He made a great film, a very insightful movie about being on the Never Ending Tour that you can just watch on YouTube. You just type in Winston Watson, NET, Never Ending Tour. That just talked about working with Dylan and about being on the road and just like never stopping, just sort of the madness, but also the calmness of like constantly moving with Dylan, right? I recommend you checking that out. So my favorite tunes: Dirt Road Blues, Till I Feel. Skip that one. Cold Iron Bound, Till I Fall in Love with You, but I've written it in some kind of, I'm not sure what language this is. Also Cold Irons Bound, but Dylan got very sick after this, right? He had a fungal infection, which apparently he got from living too close to a river and having high water, again with the floods, right? So he had to cancel an entire tour after this, and a lot of people were scared that this was going to be the end. It would have been a good way to go out, but there was much more, even better stuff to come. So thankfully that didn't happen. So we have a new longest song in the Dylan kind of canon, which is Highlands, clocking it at 16 minutes and change. The tune Million Miles, his vocal cords sound like they're dipped in Jack Daniels, which is sort of how mine are sounding at the moment. There's also a tune Standing in the Doorway, which oddly enough, I have that right here, another Minneapolis band had recorded not the same version, much earlier, Soul Asylum, right, on Twin Tone Records, a tune called Standing in the Doorway. There was some like controversy, what does that even mean? But 4 people talked about it on the internet, that they were mad that the song titles, I don't know that Bob plays these records. He might know of it. It's hard for me to say. But also this tune, Dirt Road Blues, I mentioned a little earlier, has a famous sort of Lanois attribute, which is like this Elvis echo, this interesting kind of microphone reverberation. And then last but not least, the White Stripes, who we all know and love greatly, recorded Lovesick, which is the first tune on this. So the tune I couldn't tell you is called Till I Fell in Love with You. Maybe I still can't, so I'll just let it go. So anyway, let's keep going, because we're getting closer to 2000s, I swear. As in, could we be there? Here is Love and Theft. We are there, right? So 2001. This is the deluxe version, meaning you get an extra disc that they usually only put like 1 or 2 things on. It's like, ugh. Okay, so you get the extra disc. I paid 92 cents. If you really zoom in, you can see that. So it's not a great loss. Produced by Bob himself, now under the name Jack Frost. Okay, terrific record. I feel like this is another trio. I've avoided saying trilogy all day long. Another trio of that's really interesting work from Bob Dylan. So he loved the live sound that they were getting on the road with the band, right? And it could arguably be his best band that he's ever had, which is Charlie Sexton, Larry, David, Tony, and then Augie comes back, right? Augie Meyer from the Texas Tornadoes. But more than that, here's an interesting story I'm going to tell you anyway. We know we're out of time. My mother went to high school with Augie Meyer in San Antonio at Sam Houston High School. And he, in fact, played a birthday party that she attended when they were in high school. So I've seen Augie one time when I lived in Memphis. Him and his wife came in to eat where I worked. He's a super talented guy who played with the Texas Tornadoes and played with Dougie Somm way before that, like in doing this sort of Tex-Mex sound, and had some big hits with like She's About a Mover and whatever. So anyway, yeah, so we have the touring band in this. And my tunes, the tunes I love are Mississippi, I've mentioned 100 times. Guess what? There's still 100 more times I'm going to mention it. Summer Days, High Water, because there's always flooding, and Honest With You, and Cry a While. So great record. And we're now into the 2000s, 2001. So let's keep going. We have a bit of a gap before the next album, right? So which means we have time for a movie soundtrack. Yay! And this movie is Masked and Anonymous from 2003. And if this movie was anything, if this movie didn't live up to your expectations, you need to check your expectations. And so many people talk bad about this movie. It premiered at Sundance. It was oddball. What do you want? I mean, really, seriously, what do you expect? You expect it to look like, the Mission Impossible 3? Not going to happen. It's not that kind of thing, right? So I thought that they really put in an extra effort into this album, into this soundtrack, into this release, and it really paid off. There are, there's 2 newly recorded Dylan tunes, which are Down in the Flood, Back with the Flood, and Cold Irons Bound. And then there's 2 Dylan covers, Dixie, the traditional, Land of Dixie, and then also Diamond Joe, which we talked about sometime backwards, right? And then some of the covers are really decent, including, and I would never say The Dead. So you're saying something. The Dead doing It's All Over Now. I thought that My Back Pages was great by, I can't read this because my handwriting is so bad. Los Lobos did On a Night Like This. And also I loved Like a Rolling Stone. So those covers were really terrific. This is the deluxe version, so it gets you a copy of the reissue sampler. Because, of course, at one time they remastered and blah, blah, blah. You could rebuy all those old hits again, for the 5 millionth time. So Okay, that's good. Mask and Anonymous. Let's move on to where are we at? We must be up to, oh yeah, why not? It's 2004. Let's do a record for Victoria's Secret, right? Which is a store that sells lingerie. I don't know in the world, but definitely in America. Anyway, this has one tune on here that's kind of hard to get, a remix of Lovesick, the song we just talked about from the album before Mask and Anonymous, and that the White Stripes had covered. Some clever lad on the internet said, I bet you didn't know that Salvador Dali was also a singer. So, that's what you get. Okay, new pile. And then I feel like this is part 3 of the trio recently, although it's now spanned almost a decade. 2006, we have Modern Times, produced by Jack Frost, aka Bob Dylan. This is the deluxe version, so it comes with a DVD with some videos. Blood in My Eyes, Lovesick, Things Have Changed, and Cold Iron's Bound. Is it even numbered? No way. Get real. Limited edition, it just says, not numbered. 2006, he is now recording with a touring band. You know them if you're a fan. It's Tony, it's George, Denny and Donnie. Stu is along for the ride now. Stu Kimball on guitar. Controversy surrounding the credits because, maybe some of it might have been lifted, but come on. Let's move on, please. Starts collecting stamps or something. It doesn't matter. Overwhelming positive response to this album. My favorite tunes, Rollin' and Tumblin', and The Levee's Gonna Break, which you've heard before from Led Zeppelin and, etc., others. But good record. Pretty solid. Modern Times. Cue helicopter. So we're getting closer to the current day, thank heavens, which is 2009's Together Through Life. This is the deluxe version, so you get a poster. Okay, and a DVD of some outtakes from the Scorsese film, which we haven't gotten to yet, but maybe we will. If it doesn't wind up being 2021 when we're done with this. But done with a touring band, as usual, or as lately, I should say, plus David Hidalgo of Los Lobos, who has plenty of accordion, which is gorgeous, really, throughout the record. And Mike Campbell, I should mention, from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. The other part of the deluxe I forgot to mention is a compact disc of his radio show, kind of hits of the radio show. He did a bunch of them. I don't have that many of them. I have maybe 2, but I wish I had more. But here's one of them on here. So if you're unfamiliar with that, you can pick that up. I think the radio show's been gone for kind of a while now. But this is a bit of a mixed bag, and therefore different than I would say the trio beforehand. But I do love Beyond Here Lies Nothing, My Wife's Hometown, which is D.C., but it's not on this. And If You Ever Go to Houston, which I actually do go to Houston with some frequency. So it makes me like it even more. Moving on to Christmas. Wow. So this is 2009. We're almost within a decade of current times. The first time I heard this, I go, this is some one-take wonder shit. Meaning they'd done, you know what it means. But it's fine, right? It's funny that he does a Christmas album. But again, he's Bob Dylan. So whatever your expectations are of him, he doesn't care. He doesn't care what I think or you think. He does what he wants to do. That's what we love about him. But we all love the original tune, Must Be Santa. And it's a great music video. You know what? And it's fun to watch and listen to. And that's why this is truly worth having. And, around the holidays, when you've heard enough Mariah Carey, shit, put this thing on. It's great. It's much better, much more interesting. So moving on. We don't need to spend too much time on that. We're now up to 2012. This record is called Tempest. Okay? Recorded at Groove Masters. And I mentioned that because that's in Santa Monica, California. 11th in Colorado. You can go over there, stand on the sidewalk. Don't bother them because you're going to get busted. But you can feel some of the vibes coming out from this session, which happened at this point quite a long time ago. But I feel like it's a return to the trio of Love and Theft and Modern Times and A Time Out of Mind. Solid record throughout. It's a kind of offering that his most ardent fans like me really appreciate, especially in this day and age, right? And really says he still got it. Truly, he still got it. this record proves it, right? So the deluxe edition, which I don't have, apparently came with a Horner harmonica, which I got to say would be kind of cool to have, but not that I would play it. But the first tune and my favorite track, which was in fact a 45. Oh, let me hear that Duquesne whistle blowing, and does in fact sound a lot. Written with Robert Hunter, I might add, Grateful Dead lyricist, who we haven't heard from for a little while, but does in fact sound like a train rolling down your living room if your speakers are in your living room. So Duquesne whistle, we love. Narrow Way, which has my favorite line on the album, which is, you'll work down to me someday. You'll work down to me someday, which is true. Long and Wasted Years. Make sure I got that right. Yes, I did. Paying Blood and Early Roman Kings. So Duquesne Whistle, has a really interesting video done by hip director Nash Edgerton that has a sort of Chaplin-esque with a very dark ending, but I recommend if you haven't seen it, and you probably have, but it's on YouTube for you to check out. So I forgot this 45, which I went for a whopping $1.99, but apparently in 2007 there was another compilation, Dylan and His Greatest Hits, and so they let Mick Ronson, who we talked about from back in the Hard Rain days, being on the road with Dylan, remix some tunes. So this is kind of interesting. I think Mick Ronson was in David Bowie's band, right?
Yeah.
I hope. Or I just lied to the world, but yeah. So it has most likely You Go Your Way, You Go Mine. There's a couple of different ones. There's an original one that was produced by Bob Johnson, the same Bob we talked about previously, and Mick Ronson with a remix.
Ronson.
Huh?
It's Mark Ronson.
Oh shit. How many times did I call him Mick?
No, it's two different people.
Oh, they are two different people.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna have to cut that out. No, we're not. We're leaving that in for sure. Mick and Mark. How embarrassing. Okay, let's keep going because we're up to the 2015, we saw Shadows of the Night. So this is odd and unusual, and it's Donnie on pedal steel and Tony on bass, right? And we're now doing standards. And so there winds up being 3 of these records. We'll talk about all of them. I thought 1 was plenty, so of course we got 2, and then we got a triple record, so it feels like 5. But this cover looks remarkably like Freddie Hubbard's Hub Tones on Blue Note, which is also a great record. I love I'm a Fool to Want You, Night We Call It a Day, and What'll I Do? So we have that one right here. The Night We Call It a Day with Stay With Me. A nice little 45 produced by Jack Frost, aka Bob Dylan. So this was the beginning of the standards. Okay, so we move in a couple of years. This is the last tour I saw because it's the last time he's been around here in Los Angeles. Is Fallen Angels 2016. Yes, we do have a 45. One of the people in the audience gave this to me. This is actually an EP. It's colored vinyl. It has Melancholy Mood, All or Nothing at All, Come Rain or Come Shine, and that Old Black Magic. This is a great record. Really is. Beautiful. Beautiful to look at. Beautiful to watch playing with this sort of red vinyl. But Fallen Angels is what we're talking about now. More standards with the touring band, right? At this point, it's Charlie, Stu. Stu I'd like a little less than Charlie. Dean, Donnie, Tony, and George. Tony and George have been there forever at this point, especially Tony Gagnier, right? More critical praise for this album. I don't love all these standards records, but again, for a guy who doesn't love them, you still got a lot of favorite songs on here. Young at Heart, All the Way, All or Nothing at All, It Had to Be Me, Old Black Magic, Come Rain or Come Shine. Sometimes I don't know if I'm writing down my favorite Frank Sinatra songs or my favorite Bob Dylan songs, but I do love Frank Sinatra as well. So, okay, Hold for the Helicopter. We're getting up to speed here with this is Triplicate from 2017, right? More standards. And because you thought 2 weren't enough, now you get 2 plus 1 plus 2 more, so it's now 5, which is extensive. That's plenty. The record version, it was 3 records. I want to say each album or each side was 30 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever, so it was very succinct about having them be that way. And the videos for this series of records were all like kind of Victrola style or whatever, record players playing the records. So, phone it in. I could have done that. Anyway, I Could Have Told You I Love, My One and Only Love I Love, and also Stardust. It's hard to tell whether I Love is part of the title or does it really matter. Even more critical praise for this. However, Neil McCormick of the Telegraph, I've already messed up Mark and Mick. Jesus, how embarrassing. But Neil McCormick of the Telegraph, a UK paper, I believe, said Bob Dylan should stop crooning and get back to writing songs. Triplicate is an act of self-indulgence of interest to a completist. Well, here I am, right, the completist. So you can like it, you can not like it. It's up to you. He does play a lot of these tunes on the road. So I skipped them. How many minutes are we in? Is like absurd.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Everyone wants more.
Yeah, you only 50 in on this.
Wait, it's absurd at this point. But I missed some things that are important, right? I mean, it's all important. Who says who? In '85, Biograph came out, right? This was a great treat. This belongs to my friend Robert Quartz. It's the LP version, 5-record set. But before the bootleg series, this was sort of like showing what was available. It was like a precursor, we could say, right? What is available, right? And I can't say enough good things about this, right? I don't know that it was the first box set per se, but it was certainly an early box set. I felt like it spurred a lot more box sets, like the Springsteen's 5-record set came out not long thereafter. If I'm wrong about that, you can let me know. But it included gems like Jet Pilot, which is 51 seconds long. You don't need 5 records for 51 seconds. Caribbean Wind, which has the background singers doing this whole like shh, ah, shh, ah, shh, ah, which I just go, wow, what is that? That's an outtake from Shot of Love, which is a record I love. I'll Keep It With Mine, Lay Down Your Weary Tune, other songs I love. You're a Big Girl Now, a different version. I want to say that's from Blood on the Tracks. Groom Still Waiting at the Altar, I keep talking about that. I love it, which may or may not have been included on Shot of Love, depending on which one you bought. And then Up to Me, which is splendid. It has an awesome book. It has, oddly, like these kind of padded LP sleeves that they fit in so the records won't deteriorate. Damn, and they haven't, because it's been 30 years and they're still in good shape. Amazing. If I have one complaint, it's only that side 10. It seems like there's quite a bit of real estate between the last song and the run-out groove. But it could just be like a sequencing thing, It's nothing to get like personally angry about. But that was sort of before this, which was the beginning of the bootleg series, right? Volumes 1 through 3. So a bit of a hiccup in the numbering system as in, this is the three slurring his words. Give him some more to Heaven's Door. 3-disc set, but they're individually numbered, right? But it contains tunes from 61 to 91. So we go back to that 30 year. We had a 30th anniversary disc. 30 years was very important, right? And Columbia kind of made it happen, which is admirable, I will say, right? It should have been just one, though. It's nearly 4 hours long. It's a lot, right? So Biograph was 6 years before this, 85. But this is a complete sort of treasure trove of that material. The outtakes, the alt version, the live, etc., right? And stuff that had largely been forgotten for 30 years. But I sort of believe like this was the beginning of all the bootleg series and the sort of beginning of this kind of push where it used to be they come out with less frequency. Now the bootlegs come out with more frequency, right? Yeah, so not surprising, I was most excited about the last half of disc 1 because it has the more recent stuff, including a bunch of outtakes from Infidels, the record I love. Yeah. So there's a great book in here with stories on each and every recording. Here's a review that I thought was sort of funny. The reviewer says, and when another exercise in emptiness, like Under the Red Sky, comes out, you keep hoping for the great Lost Dylan songs, whole albums, and then some. And I really believe this was, right? So this was great. This was really great. Some tunes I like on here, The Walls of Red Wing, about, I want to say like the, where you put troubled youth in Red Wing, Minnesota. One of those kind of, it's not a prison, but it's kind of a prison. Prison school. John Birch, I always love. Davy Moore, Who Killed Davy Moore? And If You Gotta Go, Go Now, or else you gotta stay all night, which is just funny. And at the very end of this, I just want to say is the tune Series of Dreams, and the song before it, which is When the Night Come Falling from the Sky, kind of ends, and Series of Dreams sort of bubbles up from the ground, and it just pulls you in. It is the best sequencing. The songs slightly overlap, so your iPod, iPhone are probably messing with them, but if you can play the record or the compact disc, it's gorgeous, right? It's totally gorgeous. Okay, so... Oh yeah, so backing up in a sense. Are you sure you want to hear about them? There's like 8 of these, 10, 12. This is going to have to be 2 parts, I feel like. And everyone here is getting hungry, so we need to eat soon. This is Telltale Signs, Volume 8 in 2008, so about 11 years ago. One of my favorites because it has disc cards from those sessions that made Oh Mercy, World Gone Wrong, Time Out of Mind, Modern Times, those abandoned Bloomberg sessions we talked about from '92 that later became good as Ive Been To You. They had other acoustic album of covers, right? And then soundtrack tunes, right? And not only that, but the deluxe version, did I write down the songs? I did not. This is not the deluxe version, this is the basic version, has 2 different versions of Mississippi, but the deluxe has 3. I'm like, so plus the original, I now have 4 versions, and guess what? They all are good. Every one of them, good. Listen to them. Every time I pick it up, go right to Mississippi. Space. So it is, there is a Dignity, that's like the piano version. There's everything that is broken with different lyrics. There's a fantastic Dreaming of You. There's a very loose God Knows, that just takes my breath away, literally. There's a very bright Dignity on here. There's a Ring Them Bells they did a series of supper club shows in New York City where they not only did a 3-camera shoot, it was multiple nights. They did a 3-camera shoot. They also did multi-track recording, and Dylan actually paid for all of it. It wasn't the label, and it's never been released. None of it. Not the video, not the audio, except, well, here's one track, right? So I suspect in the future that will be another package, right? Dylan's grandkids are hooked up. Don't worry. So there's also Lonesome River with Ralph Stanley, and there's another tune with Ralph Stanley, which if we get to it over here on this pile, but Ralph Stanley's great, bluegrass, amazing, right? My favorite lyric on this whole thing is, you can always come back, but you can't come back all the way. And that pretty much sums up a lot of it. So this is Cutting Edge, which we skipped right over. This is from 2015, not long ago. This is the best of, so it's minimal at best. The usual 2 discs plus a fancy book. Volume 12 in the bootleg series. These are demos, outtakes, etc. from 65 to 66, right? The big 3 we call them, Bringing It All Back Home, Highway 61, Blood on Blood. Called Cutting Edge because Dylan at the forefront of the movement, like for real. Some folks think it's too tedious because it's very... they complain about it because of the sequencing and the repetition, it becomes tedious, I guess would be a better way to put it. This one in particular has Subterranean Homestead Blues with some fumbled lyrics. I've been fumbling words all day, so how could I not love that? Mr. Tambourine Man, where Dylan stops the recording and says, "That drumming is driving me mad. I'm going out of my brain." That's $16 right there, as far as I'm concerned. Highway 61 with no whistle / siren, and which I had one, but I lost it. Someone gave me one. I was going to do it for you now to annoy you, but it's gone. A Visions of Johanna, which is faster and louder. Memphis Blues, a song I love, which is much slower. And Just Like a Woman with this crazy kind of Bo Diddley beat. And yes, it's good. And then also there's a conversation between Bob Dylan and the producer Tom Wilson on here that they left in. And loads more. I mean, truly loads more. There is, I do love If You Gotta Go, Go Now. I love that song. Anyway, it's on here. The collector version comes with hold your breath or stop the presses, 379 tracks. Yes, I do have it. It's not this. It takes up more space. I don't have the proper version, but that also comes with 945 records that all have picture sleeves, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, really is collectible, really nice things. But I think in reference to the tedious, which could also frankly describe me, and repetition, which could also frankly describe me, they're talking about the 379 track version, because it can get to be a lot. But that was gifted to me, and it was really terrific. So, okay. Really? Should we go more?
Almost done.
Okay, we're almost done. All right, you heard it, which, yeah, I mean, that's fast. So, okay. And these sort of in random order, anyway. From 2010, Bootleg Series number 9, the Whitmark demos. From 62 to 64, the publishing company, his publishing company, had him come in, record a bunch of stuff in the office. Obviously, they were going to take these tracks and maybe sell them to other artists to record. That's kind of how it was done long ago. So they were recorded on a reel-to-reel machine. They were recorded in a tiny studio that's like 6x8, right, on 51st and Madison in New York. If you're going by, yeah, look for that. I'm sure it's still there. In New York City, I love Bear Mountain. Funny, still funny. John Birch, controversial at the time, still terrific. Baby Let Me Follow You Down, and When Your Ship Comes In. This is really a pretty solid collection, and I'm sort of like, I feel like this era might be, I'm good. I don't need more from the early 60s, but this is a pretty decent collection. So while we're in those early 60s, let's just keep going. Here's from 64. It was often bootleg. This is volume 6 in the bootleg series, coming out proper in 2004. Recorded on Halloween night in Manhattan. Great energy, great vibe from the crowd. There's no denying that, right? Joan Baez was there, of course. She's singing a couple of tunes. Very protest song heavy, if you can say that. The entire concert was probably their first time together. There's lots of enthusiastic applause about it. I still love to hear Talking John Birch, Paranoid Blues, Too Good. Davey Moore, Who Killed Davey Moore, if you don't know, about a boxer who died in the ring. It's a tremendous song. Comes up a lot in the early days, not so much recently. Gates of Eden, which is one of his highly acclaimed tunes. If you gotta go, go now, or else you gotta stay all night. A little bit of humor goes a long way in this heavy stuff, and that was it. I feel like I Don't Believe You, terrific tune, and All I Really Want to Do, which has some laughter in it. And so again, if you can give me some laughter, I'm all for it. Let's stick with the 60s. So here we are with Royal Albert Hall, which this came out in 98, so I've had it 20 years. And only recently this month learned that it's not actually Royal Hall, because I actually read the damn book. Before I just took it for granted. But the Royal Albert Hall is in quotes on this. This is bootleg series number 4, 20 years ago. It's actually Free Trade Hall in Manchester, UK, right? And it was wildly bootlegged and called Royal Albert Hall, and that's why it's called Royal Albert Hall. However, it's not really Royal Albert Hall. It's the famous recording where someone in the crowd called him Judas. It makes great theater that you're so outraged that you went to to see Bob Dylan. This happened. Again, in the context of the times, in this day and age, it sounds absurd. But in the context of the times, I'm sure it was a big deal. Dylan was a folkie. He was turning electric. He was leaving you behind. If you weren't hip enough or weren't, advanced enough to follow him, that's a you problem, not a him problem, as far as I'm concerned. He does at one point, Dylan turns to the band, or actually I think it was Robbie Robertson, and says, "Play fucking loud." And you can hear that on here, I think, if you listen very closely, right? But, so one disc is acoustic, one disc is electric, and it is a blistering live set, right? Truly blistering live set. There is debate about which side is better. Again, stamp collectors, debate all you want. I will say that the real Royal Albert Hall came out, and I don't have that with me here today, unfortunately. Also from that same era, I think it was recorded, maybe within a month of this one, perhaps later. And the live set, the electric set is unreal, right? I think Dylan's a little loose with the Heaven's Door, and the band, and they're all piss and vinegar. And at one point, Dylan says, "Come up here and say that to somebody in the audience," because they're giving him shit, and it's great. I mean, you got to hear it, right? I'm sorry I don't have that, but "Baby Let Me Follow You Down" on this one is great. It is loose and loud, just the way I like it. It's sort of electric, kind of Take No Prisoners set, and it's worth hearing, right? We'll slowly move into the 70s. Here we are in 1975. This is volume number 5. Okay. From 2002. And recorded prior to Desire, and perhaps a companion to Hard Rain, although this is the second leg of the tour, and apparently the band, or just the vibe was a lot more solid, and the production a lot better. Or I should say this, the way the songs are presented a lot better. Not the production per se, but there is a DVD extra which I've misplaced, which I'm bummed, because it has like a couple of tunes which I bet are going to be in the Scorsese thing in July on Netflix for free, right? But oddly, it only has like Tangled Up in Blue and Isis. So like, here's a whole DVD. Why don't you put some stuff on there? But they put 2 tunes, and the slot is cut like in a weird place, which if you have it, you're like, it always falls out on your racks. Stupid. Like, get it together, Columbia. So my favorite thing on this is "It Ain't Me, Babe," because it has a very deliberate delivery and pace, and so that's certainly worth hearing. Speaking of Scorsese, the movie's coming up in July. It's free on Netflix. I'm sure there'll be a sound or something physical to accompany it that is for your ears. Not that we not seen. Don't even start with that. So it's been a lot of basement tapes in the band. I feel like I'm in the flood at the moment. So this is No Direction Home, Volume 7 from 2005. It is a film soundtrack from a Scorsese film that was on PBS. It's the usual demos, outtakes, live recordings. Unreleased materials, right? Sort of from 59, which is like pre-start, but by far, pre-record deal, to 66, covering like his rise to stardom, right? There is the Judas version, which was already over here. It comes back where Dylan says to the person, "I don't believe you, you're a liar," which I thought, is great. Perfect comeback, right? It has like a Rolling Stone from that Manchester. Well, we just talked about that. So Maggie's Farm, where the audience seems just generally pissed off and they're mad about the electric guitar. That's always very entertaining for a hot second. And you might enjoy hearing a lot of alternative takes, which are on here. They have an alternative take of Just Like Tom Thumb's Blues. I'm going back to New York City. I do believe I've had enough. And the Memphis Blues again. There's an alt take on that. So that's pretty cool. Well, let's get to these. They're tiny and nothingness. This is the only thing I got to say about this is where my mother-in-law got her doctorate. Brandeis. So this comes free with bootleg number 9. It's a little slipcover. It's got the old school kind of label. It has Talkin' John Birch, Paranoid Blues, which I love, right? Oh yeah, my favorite line is Sherlock Holmes discovered they were red, right? When red meant something else, and then he remarks about how there's red on the American flag. That old Betsy Ross, see, there it goes, falls out instantly. All right, we're gonna have to edit that out. But Betty, that old Betsy Ross, he says, which is funny, right? Betsy Ross put red on the American flag, right? Also, they have that Talkin' Bear Mountain Bear Mountain Picnic Massacre Blues, which is an hilarious story, right? And my favorite kind of line from that is Bob says, "Well, I'm just gonna stay in my kitchen and have a picnic in my bathroom," right? So make it easy. That's Brandeis. Also, there's Carnegie Hall from the same time. Let's put the hole in the top. Disc won't fall out of this one, I promise. This is from 63. Some of these songs are on bootleg 1 and bootleg 7. Why? I Love God on Our Side, but it's like an EP, so it has 3 songs. So it's just like, can you just put the whole damn thing on there? Right? Columbia, hello? So of Carnegie, we're missing a bunch of pieces off this. So it's kind of short. That's a great photo, right? The hole's on top. Here's another one of the same vein, Gaslight 62. This is sort of a companion piece to No Direction Home, which we saw here, but not part of that package. An extra fee will be required. And it was available only at Starbucks. Yes, I'm going to take a break. And one review said, I mean, some of this, they're so sarcastic, I just love it. It said, and sadly worth the stench of burned milk and spilled espresso. Okay, so I did. I went to Starbucks and bought this damn record. And here's what's funny about it is that not only did they only include 10 of the songs that were out of 18, I think. So they missed a whole swath of it. And it fits. The songs are all tiny. So it's not like they did it for that reason. But in an effort to save tape, this story's hilarious. Like, they turn the recorder off at the end of every song, sometimes like chopping off the last couple of notes. So there's no ambience at all in this thing. I get it. In 62, maybe you didn't know, at the Gaslight in New York City, maybe you didn't know Bob Dylan was going to be big, right? So you're like, I'm not spending another 49 cents on another reel of tape that he might burn up. So you might not have known, admittedly. But what the funny story about this is, even more funny than the Starbucks is that because it was exclusively at Starbucks, HMV in Canada pulled all the Dylan stock when it came out because they were pissed because they couldn't get it, right? And they left the stock off, except they did bring it out for Christmas and put it back, right? And then they took it back off the shelves. And if anyone from Canada is watching this and you have details about that, I would love to hear them, right? But nevertheless, when it did come out again on Columbia, and this is, well, it's legacy, whatever. Sony, it's been bought and sold more times than that old used car you drive. But this is the Starbucks version. When it came back, Columbia made a deal with HMV, and if you bought any Bob Dylan record, they'd give you this one. So, welcome back. Our Canadian people can comment on that. So it's getting a little long, but guess what? We've got some sound. Somebody needs to eat. I promise this is going to be fast. How many minutes has it been? It's like an hour plus another hour. Oh shit, that's awful. More than
we're like 225.
All right, we're not doing this.
No, not doing it.
Close.
It's been 225. No, it's been 219. Less the time we pee break. I forgot to start.
Oh, okay. That's a pee break. Oh, it could be down to 209.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, keep going.
Okay, this is going to be fast because these are just like quick shots, right? This is Hank Williams' Timeless, and it's worth having. Dylan does one tune, a terrific I Can't Get You Off of My Mind. Beck is also on here. There's a lot of hit people on here, but Keith Richards, Hank 3, on and on. But I Can't Get You Off of My Mind is tremendous. Here it is. This is The Sopranos, that very famous HBO television program, and on this, Bob does Return to Me, which I want to say was a cast-off from some of this, this hot mess. That's a Dean Martin song, generally, but it's really quite splendid on here. This is a double disc. Everybody's on here. Elvis, that's Costello, probably maybe the other one too, but I'm not going to go into all of them, but Keith Richards as well, since we mentioned him from here, and some dialogue. But Bob's contribution, Return to Me, is wonderful. Here is a tribute to Johnny Cash, and Bob does Train of Love. And it's not only is it a nice tune, but Bob did a whole introduction, dialogue introduction about Johnny Cash appreciating him when nobody else did. And he's sorry that he's unable to be there because I think this was at, it was a live recording that maybe the live band, the Never Ending Tour did while the funeral or memorial was taking place, but it's totally worth having. And I think I got this at Amoeba for like $4, so spring for it. Here, this has so many stickers you can't even see what it is, but this is Gods in Generals, which is a film. It has an epic Dylan tune, Cross the Green Mountain. And you can kind of just tell from its intro that it's going to be like a Dylan story, you know. And this one in particular comes with a DVD that has a very snazzy music video that they also made about the same time with Dylan in it. That's kind of worth seeing at least once, although I'm sure you can see it on YouTube, but whatever. Kind of good. Oh, and this is back to Natural Born Killers. And I want to say that this is a Reznor. Yeah, it is. This is produced by Trent Reznor. You Belong to Me, which was a huge hit for Joe Stafford back in the day, and is absolutely wonderful by Dylan on this. My only gripe is maybe that there's a little bit of, they put some movie dialogue in the song, but otherwise still tremendous. And speaking of Flat Duo Jets, which we did 4 hours ago, Dexter Romweber, the singer of Flat Duo Jets, does a great version of this too. See the pyramids along the Nile and watch the sunrise on a tropical isle. Definitely worth having, and these days you can get it for a song. Who knew I would have this ever? The Divine Secrets of the Ya-Ya Sisterhood? What? So, decent original, right? With Bob, Larry, Tony, and George. Okay, Larry Campbell, Tony Gagne, and George, drums. Waiting for You is the tune. So kind of cool. Grab it if you can. This is Dylan Country. I mean, we don't have time to do like all the compilations. I don't have them all, or all the soundtracks, or it goes on and on and on. I tried to hit a couple that I thought were interesting. But this has a tune with Earl Scruggs, not Nashville Skyline Rag, which was on that Nashville Skyline album. The instrumental I commented on 4 days ago. And so it's, if this ain't bluegrass enough for you, you need to get some swabs and check your ears, because it's full on bluegrass. Great tune. Phil in Minnesota. Yeah, don't end on this. Okay, good. We have another one. This is a movie with, the guy who's in all the movies, Keanu. And speaking of Johnny Cash, so here's Ring of Fire, which is produced by Nile Rodgers. It's got too much Nile Rodgers on it, and I love Nile Rodgers. But it's slicker, what did I say? It's slicker than a moss-covered downsloping driveway on a rainy day. That's a mouthful. So it's not a perfect song by any means, and I know that there's Ring of Fire by Bob, by Johnny, by Bob floating out there that you can find. This also has Wilco and Sunvolt. Why did I put World Star? What does that mean? Oh, probably maybe the replacements? I don't know, whatever. Some of my notes don't make any sense. So, but let's end on this, because this is a good one. Good Rockin' Tonight, where Bob sings. Elton John is on here too, but Bob does sing Red Cadillac and a Black Mustache. This is a 2001 release, not long after Love and Theft that we talked about. That Bruce of Bruce and Joe fame made a documentary about Sun. Bruce and Joe, who you may or may not know, I used to live in Memphis, so we know them as being around, but they made that whole series about the West Memphis 3, and there was a lot of them with Metallica doing the soundtrack. But let's get back to the point. Bruce made this film, which was a documentary about Sun Records, and a decent film. It was on PBS. But the song that Bob does, a Red Cadillac and a Black Mustache, is really terrific. So we need to end it because it's been like 100 hours. We're not going to talk about Never Ending Tour. We're just not. We're not going to talk about Rack of Bootlegs, which is kind of Never Ending Tour-esque. But we need to wrap it up. All I can say is my Bob Dylan is not your Bob Dylan, and that's okay. I would love for you to make a video about your Bob Dylan and the songs you love, and I totally will watch it. You can put your respectful comments below, and until we see, although this might wind up being 4 parts, who even knows at this point, but until we see you again, we'll see you again, and it's so nice to be done with this. We're going to eat chicken wings now. Thank you.